Hey everyone, today we'll be taking a look at one of the best games ever made, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I still remember when I first picked this game up 18 years ago. Once I started playing, it grabbed me and didn't let go until I finished 4 playthroughs. It's so incredible to see this game make its way to the Switch, along with a full-on remake coming out on the PlayStation 5 in the future. Of course, performance is always an issue with the Switch, so today we'll be taking a look to see if it's worth picking up on the Switch or not, and how well it performs. As always, if you enjoy the review, be sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing for more gaming news, reviews, and discussions. With that said, let's get into it. I've always viewed KOTOR as the quintessential PC RPG, although it technically did release on the original Xbox first, but that was due to multiple delays and is another story entirely. For that reason, I've always been curious as to how well the game plays with a controller, and not only that, but how well the game has held up over the years. And this review will be more focused on how well the Switch port holds up, but I will give a quick overview of the game for newcomers to the series. And I am planning on doing a very in-depth retrospective of the game in the future as well, once I'm finished with the fall game releases. So let's start with going over what the game is for people who might not have played it before. KOTOR was created back in BioWare's heyday, and the quality still stands 18 years later. It's an RPG heavily inspired by Dungeons & Dragons mechanics, and in some ways feels like a successor of Baldur's Gate 2 and Neverwinter Nights. There's a heavy emphasis on character customization, as you're able to pick your starting attributes and feats along with your character's appearance and class. Of course, this is a game made in 2003, so the character appearance customization is very basic, but it gets the job done. But when it comes to customizing your character's abilities, there's a ton of possibilities, which gives you a lot of variety on subsequent playthroughs. Attributes like strength will make you better while using melee weapons, while constitution will help you with certain saving throws and increasing your hit points. Then feats can give you everything from stat bonuses to new moves like a power attack, or even make it so you can dual wield lightsabers. You get to use a wide range of weapons, most of which were inspired by the movies, like your straight up blaster pistols and rifles, but then you also get to use vibro swords, repeating blaster carbines, and a ton more. And when it comes to lightsabers, you can use one at a time, dual wield, or even use a double bladed version. For gear, you get your light, medium, and heavy armor, implants, visors, and energy shields, providing so many different combinations and ways to customize your character. Certain special weapons and armor are also modifiable at workbenches, so you can upgrade them as well. When it comes to Force users, they get a ton of different powers, and this is one of the things that really drew me in. You can heal your group, buff them with things like Force speed that make you run and attack faster, and then a ton of offensive abilities, which I don't want to spoil, but you will get everything from Force push to Force lightning. This is where a lot of fun can be had, and it works very well in tandem with the story, considering there are a ton of potential different story beats you can experience depending on your dialogue choices. I absolutely do not want to spoil too much of the plot, as the writing is among the best we have ever seen in a video game, and it's optimal to go into the story knowing as little as possible, but I will give a quick overview. After creating your character, you start off on a Republic ship called the Endar Spire that is under attack by the Sith. Now, while this is the same Republic we know from the movies, KOTOR is set 5,000 years before the events of A New Hope, so things are a bit different. The Republic is currently in the middle of a civil war with many Jedi and Republic soldiers joining the Sith to fight against the Jedi and the Republic. The ship serves as a quick tutorial as you work your way through it, fending off the Sith boarding party. You eventually meet up with your first companion, Carthanasi, and get off the ship in an escape pod. You land on Taris, a world that was already deeply troubled but is now in an even worse situation under Sith control. You and Karth must explore Taris to find a way back to the Republic and find Bastila, a powerful Jedi Padawan with a special ability called Battle Meditation. This ability has helped the Jedi win several key battles against the Sith, and without her, the war may be lost. While exploring the planet, you learn the history behind the events that triggered the current war, and get entangled in feuds and rivalries on Taris. There's so much lore that was expertly crafted for this game, and there's so much here for people who are fans of Star Wars. And even for people who are not fans of Star Wars might find themselves loving this game, as this was somewhat the case for me. While I enjoyed the movies, I was never a diehard fan, but this game hooked me when I first played it, and made me really invested into the Star Wars universe. Later on in the game, you will explore the galaxy, as it is somewhat of a semi-open world game. Granted, this game came out in 2003, so areas are separated by loading screens, but for the time it came out, this game was absolutely massive, and I'm still impressed with what they were able to do with the technology at the time. There's so much to experience here, and I was surprised at how well the game has held up over the years. Like I said earlier, this was created in BioWare's heyday, so the story, lore, and characters are all incredibly crafted in fine detail. Your companions aren't just random people that you walk up to that randomly decide to join your quest. They are complicated and flawed characters, all with their own unique backstories that you will get to discover throughout the game as you get to know them. Or not if you choose to, as this game employs real player choice where your actions can drastically affect the story you experience, and I still remember starting up a new game the second after I finished the game for the first time to experience it in a different light. And allies are not a passive part of the story, as they will actively engage in conversations and give their opinion. Sometimes they'll even argue with quest givers if they do not agree with them. This gives the story more personality, and again adds in more replayability, as using different companions will give you a slightly different experience in each playthrough. And this is a type of story that treats its side quests with just as much respect as it does with the main story. While of course not every side quest will be mind-blowing, many are absolutely excellent and engaging stories that stand on their own. Much like we've seen in other games, many of which got inspiration from this game, there is a morality meter in the form of light and dark side. However, while you can go from one extreme to the other, the brilliance of the writing is really showcased here because you can choose to be somewhere in the middle as well. You can play the heroic hero, dashing off to save everyone who needs saving, or be a sociopathic murderer, or be a mercenary who isn't necessarily good or bad, but only helps people when there is something in it for them. I would recommend going light side for your first playthrough. That said, going dark side, while chaotic at times, can be interesting. You really get to play whatever role you want, and whichever path you choose has some incredibly written dialogue and voice acting to enjoy. Seriously, we still have issues with video game voice acting today, but 18 years ago, it was still in its infancy. The fact that most of the voice acting is either decent or in some cases amazing is nothing short of a miracle, and was something that was very rare when KOTOR was released. BioWare also brilliantly created a diverse set of environments and planets to explore. Just walking around Taris created such a sense of wonder, as I wanted to learn everything about it and the conflict engulfing the universe. And it was so amazing to see a large-scale war between the Jedi and the Sith, one in which who was right and wrong was not always clear. I could go on for hours, and probably will in my full retrospective, but for now, let's just go over how well the game fares on the Switch. As I've already gone over, the story, the world, and the characters all hold up extremely well, but where we do see some age is the controls and combat. After playing with a controller and in handheld for the first time, I will say it was a far better experience than I imagined, but I do still think it's best experienced with a mouse and keyboard. Unfortunately, it's not as simple of a task as it should be to play on PC, but I'll go over that more later. Movement-wise, it felt pretty good. Sometimes the AI will get stuck when it auto-runs during combat, so you will have to adjust your position, but otherwise it's fine considering the age. Now, the combat is somewhat between turn-based and real-time, and you can tailor it more one way or the other depending on what options you choose. It seems like BioWare was still figuring out their combat system when they created this game, and this is somewhat of a bridge gap between Baldur's Gate 2 and Dragon Age Origins. When I originally played the game, I remember being able to queue up 3 actions, but for whatever reason, I was really only able to queue up 2 actions at the most here. Basically, you have a toolbar with a list of actions you can perform, straight up attacking, melee moves, force powers, etc. You can set the game to pause at certain times, and you can pause it whenever you want, which allows you to survey the battlefield and plan your next move. It can be a bit simplistic, and most of the time you can just zerg your way through most fights against standard enemies. And I mean simplistic in how you engage with the combat and the controls. It's actually quite complicated underneath, and there's a ton of different actions you can take each turn. Where the combat does really shine is against bosses, as strategy comes into play here. While I do not want the remake to change much, the combat is one area I wouldn't mind some improvements. Although I might need to make a whole other video on my thoughts about the remake and potential issues with it. Performance-wise, in docked mode, it generally runs very well. It targets 1080p, 60 frames per second, and the game looks really great. The frame rate can dip once you hit some of the later worlds, especially ones with wide open areas with a lot of objects on screen. It's not a huge frame rate dip, and it can be noticeable, but it's not gameplay breaking. In handheld mode, the frame rate for me was very solid. Although there's so much on screen and with a lower resolution, things were just a little too blurry to really get the full enjoyment, or at least that's how it was for me personally. Outside of the few frame rate dips, I did run into a few other minor issues. I had one hard crash to the Switch's dashboard, which is quite rare for a Switch game, but this only happened once, so I do not think it's a major issue. The other thing I ran into was this really strange effect when using a force ability that increases your run speed. I won't show it here because it made the screen so blurry it was actually unpleasant to look at. It made the screen look like a static TV channel. It's been a really long time since I played the game on PC, but I do not remember the ability making such a horrible screen effect. I hope they patch this out or at least drastically tone down the screen effect because it's a really useful ability. The one big issue, and I guess this is intentional, is a UI bubble that pops up during combat. It, no joke, takes up at least a quarter of the screen and is absolutely useless outside of blocking a large portion of the screen. It was pretty obnoxious in docked mode, but when I went to handheld, it was almost game-breaking. Screen real estate is at a premium in handhelds, and you cannot have a useless UI bubble take up that much of the screen. Apparently, according to the devs, this is intentional, and I really hope they change their minds and find a way to fix this in a future patch. Because other than that, it's an absolutely excellent port and might be the best way to experience the game. That's because the PC port was released almost a decade ago and leaves a lot to be desired. The PC port is stuck in 4:3 resolution and simply does not work with modern monitors. There are mods to change it to 1080p, but personally I had issues getting them to work, and even when I did get them running, things still did not look correct. I have no idea why they have not updated the game to fit modern resolutions on PC, but because of this, the Switch port is one of the best ways to currently experience the game. Not to mention, it's perfectly priced at $15, which is extraordinarily rare for a Nintendo Switch game. Generally, we see games marked up at a premium, so it's really nice to see something properly priced for a change. Overall, this is another great Switch port, outside of the minor issues which can presumably be fixed with patches. Considering this is an 18-year-old game, there's really no excuse for the performance issues, however slight they may be, and I do hope they are fixed. Otherwise, it's a very good experience, especially if you have not played the game in a long time. And for people who have never played the game before, I'm beyond jealous, as I'd love nothing more than to be able to experience the game again for the first time. This is such a special game for so many people, and I'm glad more people will be able to experience it now. Considering it seems like it's selling well, I'd be shocked if they did not also port over the second game as well. Although for whatever reason, that game has seen very good support on PC, and even has Steam Workshop enabled, filled with tons of great mods. But still, it would be great to play it again on the Switch and be able to play it on the go. So with that said, this is an absolute buy for everyone. Regardless of your gaming taste, this is one of those truly special games that everyone should experience at least once. And while I know there's a remake coming out in the future, I would still recommend playing this version. I'm not overly optimistic about the remake, and we still have next to no details about it. Aspyr has had a hit and miss record when it comes to ports, and I just don't see them having the capabilities of recreating such a beloved game like this. Which is a task that would be incredibly difficult, even for the most experienced and well-known studios, so it's really nothing against them personally. It'll be great if it turns out well, and I'll be the first one to praise a remake if that's the case. But looking at the current state of the gaming industry and how well other remakes have been handled lately, odds are it won't turn out very well, but again, we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, this is a good port, so I hope people who didn't play it when it was released finally get to experience Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Things are still very busy, but we are almost through the crazy fall release cycle, and I have just a few more games to finish up before I'm caught up with all my reviews. And I can't wait till I'm done with those reviews, because I just want to play through KOTOR multiple times again and really analyze everything with fine detail and do a retrospective. I really wish we were still seeing BioWare releases like this every few years. I thought CD Projekt Red would take their place, but, well, you know. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.